Good evening and welcome to the Thursday, March 7, 2024 meeting of the school committee. We have just returned from an executive session. We're going to open the public meeting here. This meeting is being recorded for playback for viewers at home or at other places. So I would like to invite everybody here to rise to the pledge of allegiance. Well, we are missing the flag. You can say it anyway. It's the flag. And you know where the flag is?
It's probably behind the curtain.
That's always a tricky thing, behind the curtain.
It is behind the curtain.
I'll get it.
It's like the Western Boss.
Yes. What else is behind the curtain?
Yes.
Put the flag in the corner.
All right. We all do.
We turn back.
Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, so first item on our agenda is public comment. I do not see anybody here from the public to participate in public comment. So we can move into, anybody has any recognitions they would like to make? So then we will move into then new business item A, which is the secondary grades 6 to 12 curriculum and instruction equity audit. Mr. LeBlanc.
All right. Thank you. So good evening to the committee. Tonight I am requesting the authorization of the committee to execute a contract with Blackprint Education Consulting to conduct an equity audit of our secondary, so grades 6 to 12 curriculum and instruction program. This is, we went through the RFP process, solicited bids. We did have one bid proposed at the cost of $53,700. Interestingly, this dollar amount falls within a $60,000 earmark that we received from the state and from Senator Spilka's office for the express purpose of conducting such an audit. So tonight I'm asking your authorization to engage in a contract with Blackprint.
Great. Any questions? Comments?
So, based on what you're just saying, the amount is covered outside of the budget at this point?
Correct. Fully funded by a state earmark.
Got it.
Wow.
Great.
No other questions?
Then is there anybody who would like to make a motion on that?
I move to authorize Mr. LeBron to execute a contract with Blackprint Education Consulting for $53,700.
So motion by Susan. Is there a second on that?
I second.
Second by Lori. All those in favor?
Aye.
And that is approved. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That brings us to item B, which is the Elmwood School gift account. Dr.
All
Kaplan.
right, thank you. I am asking the school committee to accept a $500 gift for the Elmwood School from Global Partners, and that will be used for STEM programming.
Okay. Are there any questions on that? Okay. This is the fun parts of the meeting where we get to accept money being given to us. All right. Is there a motion that anybody would like to make related to that?
I move to approve the $500 donation to the Elmwood gift account.
Okay. Motion by Lori. Is there a second? And a second by Susan. All those in favor?
Aye.
It's unanimous and approved. That brings us into item C, which is the Legacy Farms North donation, and that is Dr. Kavanaugh, you again.
Thank you. Legacy Farms neighborhood, Legacy Farms North, had their Diwali celebration this year, and they collected $2,224.13 that they very graciously donated to the schools, and that will be divided 5 ways for each school's gift account. So we just need you to approve that donation,
That's great.
and we're very grateful to them.
That's great. And I understand, I was not at that event, but that it was even bigger than last year's.
Yeah, and they came in person to bring the check, and it was really nice to catch up with them.
All right, is there somebody who would like to make a motion on that?
I move to accept the $2,204.13 donation to the district.
Okay. Motion by Susan. Is there a second on that?
Second.
Lori, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Obviously, nobody opposed, so that is unanimous and passes with many thanks to the Legacy Farms North community for that. And then that brings us into the Hopkins School Technical Advisor, and Mrs. Roderick, that is
Thank you.
for you.
And I'll just read from the memo, because I think it's important information for the community here as well. So Mass Save is offering their new building and major renovation Path to Energy Rebate Program for the Hopkins Lower Middle School project. The program incentivizes enhanced energy performance through rebates that are paid after the construction is completed and verified. The program offers a per-ton rebate for mechanical equipment as well as a per-square-foot incentive that increases based on the realized energy improvements. So what we are doing is looking to work with Thornton Tomasetti, as the technical advisor, and what they will do is put together an energy model for the project, and then they'll compare the performance improvements, and this will be part of what needs to be proven to participate in the Mass Save and receive those rebates. The anticipated rebate is expected to be $360,000 to $530,000. And the cost share is split, with Mass Save paying 75% of the fee, and the town would contribute 25%, which is $8,750.
Great. So are there questions on that?
I had a quick question about, so this is for the new building and renovations.
Correct.
Are we expending the funds before we know if the new building and renovations are approved, or like how does that work?
So we do need, this would all be part of the feasibility study that's already
Okay.
been appropriated. So what they'll do is take the design and start creating an energy model based on the design contracts. So again, it won't be money lost unless we dramatically change the design, if for some reason it does not pass at town meeting.
Understood. Okay, thank you.
Other questions? I did have one question. I mean, this is certainly the amount of, the expected rebate is significant. Is that rebate factored into what the cost is of the entire Hopkins project? Or is
Not
that-
at this
would
time.
It would bring it down.
It would bring down the cost to the community, that's correct.
That's, I think, a small amount relative to how much could be saved, so
Correct.
that's great.
And sorry, when would this work begin to create this model?
They'll begin immediately, so they're looking for this contract yesterday so that they can begin building that energy model.
Okay. There are no other questions or comments on this. Is there somebody who would like to make a motion?
I move to enter into the Mass Save Path to Energy Rebate Program for the Hopkins Lower Middle School project, and jointly select Thornton Tomasetti with Mass Save as the technical advisor for that program at a town cost share of $8,750.
Motion by Susan. Is there a second on that?
Second.
Second by Lori. All those in favor?
Aye.
There are none opposed, so that is unanimous. Thank you for bringing that forward.
Thank you.
And that brings us into policy JICI, which is weapons in school, formerly policy JIC. This is a first reading. So,
Yes, okay, thank you. So the policy working group was looking at policy JIC, and when we compared it to the MASC's policies, we realized that their policy for something like weapons in school was JICI. So we are first recommending the code change there. But as we went through it, we realized that this is not just a policy on weapons in school, but it talked also about student conduct, possessions of weapons or controlled substances, or assault on educational personnel. That's what this used to say. So when we looked at it, there were only 2 bullets that dealt with possession of a controlled substance as defined in Mass General Law, and then also assaulting a staff member. And because those things are both covered under Mass General Law, we felt like it was making this particular policy clunky and in a little bit unwieldy there, because it seemed out of place to have those two things in there. And so we wanted to streamline it and just make this about weapons in school. So we have the first two bullets about possessing a dangerous weapon, ammunition, or explosives, including but not limited to, and there's a very long list. And then the second bullet is bringing to school or school-related events any replicas of weapons or toys that resemble weapons. And we know that those are somewhat widespread now, that frequently you'll see toy guns that look very, very real. And they have been known to cause some havoc. So those two things are currently the first two bullets of the policy. And then it's come to the school's attention that some of our students who are baptized Sikhs, and in order to be a baptized Sikh, someone who practices the Sikh religion or Sikhism, you have to have gone through puberty. So they are typically older kids, and they wear a religious artifact known as the kirpan. And it does in fact have a blade on it. It's a very dull blade. Typically they come at about 3 inches long, and they are curved at the end of the kirpan. When a student wears one, you don't see it because it's typically worn under the clothing, and that's how we would want students to wear them according to our policy. And they are always sheathed, and when they say they're sheathed, we have learned from some of the members of the Sikh community that that means that they are encased in either metal or wood, and they are never to be taken out. So we wanted to make sure that that was also reflected in our policy. So the second part of the policy does talk about there being considerations for recognized religious artifacts that resemble weapons. And so we state that sacred religious articles have to comply with the metrics above and must be approved by the district according to policy JICI before the start of each school year, before a student begins carrying the artifact, or before the student begins carrying the artifact. So there will never be a kirpan in the schools that we would not know about. We would know which students were carrying them. If the kirpan did not meet the metrics above, then the building principal and the director of equity and access would probably have an opportunity to take a look at that kirpan and either approve of it or not approve of it. And then we can always, so we reserve the right to suspend the carrying of a kirpan in our schools. And we realize this is the first reading, but we did think it was important to be able to get the kirpan into that policy, because we do know that there are students who do carry kirpans in our schools. The building principals are aware of who they are, and we just wanted to be able to codify it. It is their religious right to do so.
Thank you. Are there questions? And I realize actually half of the people in the committee are on the, have had more on the policy working group, so that's probably more Lori and I who don't have as much exposure to the work that's gone, and Adam, who's not here. But is there anything else that Susan, you and Amanda, you guys would want to add to the discussion that you had on the policy?
I just think it was very thoughtfully done and a great deal of input from the Sikh community, opening discussions with them.
And I would just also add that in conjunction with the policy, like we often do, there's a draft procedure that we are working on. The procedures never fall really under the school committee. That's really operational, but just as an FYI, there will be a procedure to help guide the process for when a student wants to have the recognition that they're carrying a kirpan and they have to see the principal. There's a procedure that is being put in place to govern that. So, and when that is done, we'll probably link it to this document.
Yes, I mean, it's essentially a contract that a family establishes with the school.
So I do have a couple questions just for clarity in the policy. So the way I understood what you were describing on how a kirpan would look, it's typically 3 inches? Is that, and I'm wondering just because the policy in the section above says 2.5 inches.
Yes, that's a
Okay.
curious thing. So 2.5 is typically in all of these policies. And our legal counsel had advised that 2.5 seemed to be sort of the going length, really, for some kind of a sharp object in school. And so we took that counsel seriously, and then we learned from the Sikh community that Kirpans are largely manufactured in India, and when they are typically at 3 inches. And so, because one of them really talks about sort of all weapons in school at 2.5 inches, you know, because a person who's going to carry a Kirpan is going to work with the building principal anyway, it didn't really matter to us if it was a 3-inch Kirpan, because then we could take a look at that and say, yes, you know, we're approving your 3-inch Kirpan.
So,
On
okay,
the
so
flip
that
side, you
piece I
could
understand.
say, why can't I carry a jackknife that's 3 inches, if you change the metric?
Actually, my thing that jumps out at me is that I didn't realize that we allowed jackknives that were 2.5 or less inches. The Kirpan piece is a separate piece because it's sounds like a dull blade and it's a religious right for students to carry those. But do we in fact allow pocket knives with 2.5? Is that?
The policy is written that way. I don't necessarily know that our building principals are frequently finding kids who are carrying 2.5-inch pocket knives, but it is written that way. If we would feel that a 2.5-inch pocket knife is too much, the committee can be more restrictive with it.
I don't know that I had thought about it before looking at this policy.
So does the policy cover buses and schools?
It does.
It says including transportation at the top.
As well as school-related, so that would be like dances and athletic games, clubs,
Yes.
all that.
I know, I didn't know that any blades were allowed.
That's exactly, it's not the length of the blade so much as the fact that blades are allowed. I think that, although, I don't, and this may be a question for looking at what other policies and other communities have, but I suppose you don't want to get to a point where you're outlawing scissors, things that have practical application in school. So that's, I mean, I know that's different than a knife, but. I know. Go ahead,
I was gonna say, we can certainly, I mean, this is only the first reading of something very new, so we're not doing anything with this, but we can certainly dig more into the 2.5 inches and see what other districts have done, just to see if there's anyone who's going lower than that. We hadn't seen anything, but we can take
Or-
another look,
Totally taking them out of the policy.
yeah.
I guess I would want to know what the standard is. Are other districts allowing blades at all? It would, which way would be the outlier, but also I would want to have some feedback from the community on that, and not from teachers, building administrators, and people who are, what they're seeing, boots on the ground in the schools. Are we actually seeing knives with 2-inch blades, or?
Well, what's intriguing to me about that is if you're gonna allow a pocket knife, the
Yeah.
2.5-inch blade, why aren't you requiring those to be registered as you are the Kirpan?
Right.
It's the same thing.
Right, and this doesn't specify how sharp a knife at 2.5 inches is going to be. It doesn't have to be checked for that type of.
Not that I'm trying to add administrative duties
No,
to
but-
pocket knives, but it seems to me like, why is one required and the other isn't? So that would be my, like, I'd like to know, like, how it benchmarking what that looks like across other districts. I would love to know what the school resource officer knows about it, but,
We also talked to town council, I mean, to our district council, right, about
Yes, that's right.
the length, and there is Mass General law, I think the length stipulation is a bit fuzzy. We weren't,
Length stipulation is fuzzy.
whether it's 2.5 or 3,
Right.
right, but there is Mass General law, which we can pull up and share for next meeting.
so, in government offices, are you allowed to have a pocket knife?
I don't think you could bring that on an airplane.
I don't think you can
Like, I
get
couldn't bring it to the
through-
courthouse.
I think there are
I don't know, you can't get through security. at a
exceptions for the Kirpan, though.
No,
Right,
but
didn't
I'm
he say
not
that?
focusing on the Kirpan, I'm focusing
I
on
know,
the
any knife.
knives.
Yeah.
Knife.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So Jack, maybe you can help us with this. Do you know, I mean, you've gone through 13 years of the Hopkinton Public, have kids had pocket knives?
Yeah, I don't think it's been as much of a problem as, like, I think it's just generally, kids don't really look at, I mean, we're not going to be
Of
reading
course
this update and we're not going to telling what's new. And I think the belief right now is that generally anything dangerous, don't bring it to school.
Right,
Like,
right.
just keep it out. And if kids do, I know, like, there have been instances where, like, kids have taken, like, cafeteria knives, like, and they're outside, like, trying to sharpen a piece of wood, and then they just get, like, it's just, like, immediately, like, suppressed, and then no one really argues back, like, so I don't think it's going to be that big of a deal if it's allowed, but I could see the reasoning for wanting to sort of have a registration of those pocket knives.
I don't know that I'm looking for a registration of pocket knives so much as trying to understand what is the line. Are we allowing all knives? And it's not really specific to pocket knives that I'm thinking. It's the fact that any knives are allowed in school, that something they could be used as a weapon. It had not occurred to me that that was.
The only reason why I talk about the registration is, to me, it feels discriminatory if you're forcing
Yes.
for religious purposes to register something, but yet you can have a pocket knife. That to me doesn't feel fair. So my point isn't to create another registration point. It's like, well, we're requesting it of this one group in order to wear a religious artifact, but we're not requesting it of the rest of the rest of the student body if they want to carry a pocket knife. That just seems strange to me.
It's a good point.
Or any kind of a knife. It doesn't
Right.
have to be a specific pocket knife.
I mean, I'm sure Boy Scouts have pocket
Yes,
knives.
and like in that context, that doesn't, a pocket knife, I guess, isn't the best example in my head because I'm not thinking of people running around with pocket
With
knives.
like a steak knife.
Or I'm not thinking
Oh,
about
and-
cafeteria knives for sure.
At 2.5 inches, there are not many knives that are,
I don't know how sharp is sharp enough at any.
well, it's true, you could have a scalpel.
Yeah, but that's
Which
like
would be-
biology class.
Well, you
Also,
would need them for
I
that.
can tell you that so as a former Boy Scout and a former employee of the Boy Scouts of America, you train scouts in how to use those
Yeah.
knives. And one of the things you always say is, and also, now that you know how to use this properly, you should always have it on you, but don't ever bring it to school.
Okay.
It was very clear that there isn't
Yeah.
a reason to do
Right,
that.
because at one time it was normal that you would expect a guy to have a pocket
Yeah.
knife,
Yeah, I don't think
but
it's.
not anymore.
And similarly, the Boy Scouts also have very strict rules on what type of knife you can use. So no fixed blades, for instance. And they are trained that the sharper the knife, the better, because it's actually safer. This is all information you did not need tonight.
Well, I mean, I think that we have questions, you're right, it's the
Yeah.
first reading, those are some good questions that have come up, and we should explore them before we come back for the second reading. And maybe somebody out there will read it and have some public opinion on it, but
And that, I think that would be good to have a little bit of public feedback on that as well as from people, administrators, building administrators, building level.
And to contextualize it, no one's looked at this since 2009.
9, yeah, I saw that.
Yeah.
I think we did share this with some building administrators, right?
Yes, the building
Okay.
principals have seen it.
Okay.
I think these are great questions. We need to do some more work.
Yeah. I can't remember why we want to register the current one.
Okay, so that, then we'll shelve that for further reading and for more input and information. Brings us into old business, item A, which is the math presentation. Dr. Kavanaugh.
Sure. So
You wanna
you've
bring
seen
Mr. Lefebvre up?
most of this before. Yes, and we'll bring Mr. Lefebvre up so that he can make comments as well. So we'll probably just sort of zip through the front part of it because I think that the high interest lies in the last part of it. So this is the same beginning that we had presented to you several weeks ago. And we are now remaking this presentation because there was a possible change to grade 6 math instruction, math curriculum. So just historically, so you know how this started, in 2022, we really wanted to start thinking about the efficacy of our math curriculum in grade 6. And even though we did a lot of work in the first year, we weren't really ready to move on. And so in the second year, we put together a math educational study group. And we started in the spring of '23, and we are obviously just concluding now. And I want to thank those people who came together on Wednesday mornings over to the central office at the near crack of dawn. But we had 3 building principals, we had anyone who is a director of math or a coach of mathematics in the district, the assistant superintendent, me, the K-12, the 6 to 12 special education director of curriculum instruction and assessment, and the director of student services. So there were loads of really bright minds at the table. And then we started to dig down really deep into individual data. And we also looked at lots of data in the aggregate, but you'll see that in a little bit. This is some of the work that the math study group did. I don't need to go through that again because I think you saw it all last time. You can see that we started with things like MCAS, and we looked at 2019 and we said, that was our pre-pandemic year. Are we bouncing back? And we were very pleased to see that 2019 and 2023 were looking very similar to one another. We started to take a look at 2017, so we went back that far in time, and we said, all right, if you were in the 6th grade in math, 7th grade in math, 8th grade in math, what was the average SGP score? And we were looking and seeing that they were 65%, 75%, and 85%. And this was a very, very long time ago, but we were already sort of seeing that when you started to level our kids in grade 7 and grade 8, maybe these SGP scores were just a little bit higher. And that was one of the thoughts we had early on. We also broke our kiddos down into some of these subgroups. And so you can see, if we look at how many students were, or what percentage of students were exceeding expectations in terms of students with disabilities, and this is 2017, it was 2%. If you were economically disadvantaged, 10%, high needs 3%, and so on all the way down the line. And so we did that for 2018. We did it for 2019. We skipped 2020, which was the pandemic year, so there was no MCAS. And when we got to the spring of '21, we didn't put much stock in that either, because our kids were really just coming, they were taking the MCAS in a year after they had lost a lot of education and then were coming every other day. And so then we got to 2022, and we started to get to places of recovery here. So when we looked at our median SGP for grade 6, it was at 61, 68 for grade 7, and 66 for grade 8. And we said, well, they're kind of leveled out. Maybe the leveling of math isn't really having some kind of an impact. And so when we took a look at 2022, our subgroups, our white students were at 56 for an SGP, our students with disabilities were at 52 for an SGP, and Asian students 71, high needs 63, low income 60, and L's and form L's 75. So those were really nice, I think, high SGP scores. We also did some surveying of our students. We asked kids if they were feeling confident in their math classes. And so anybody here who is in the red or the blue strongly agreed and then our kids who were not really sure if they were confident in math were over here in the yellow. But the kids who were disagreeing and strongly disagreeing, those are much smaller pieces of the pie. Asking students if they complete the enrichment problems in math, about 24% of them said, yes, I am doing that consistently, and our yellow students, the sometimes kids, said, no, I'm not. About 20% of the, said sometimes, and about 20% of our kids said no. And then we asked our students if they receive math support outside of school. And just to be clear, kids could say yes to these 3 things right here. So do you attend a program such as Russian School of Math or Kumon? 56 students or 23% said yes. Do you receive math tutoring? 18 students or 7.4% said yes. And then when we asked them if they work on math with someone at home, 67 or 28% said yes. 126 students or half of the kids said no to those questions. In math, I feel like I learned from others. About 70% of the kids said they do, 30% of the kids said they did not. So that was all very interesting data. One of the things that you don't see in tonight's presentation are the 4 case studies that we did, and that would be personally identifying, so we don't put student data up there because we really dug very deeply into 4 individual kids, one who tested in STAR in the green, the blue, the yellow, and the red, which is exceeding, meeting, partially meeting, not meeting expectations. It was so interesting to see how the kids were, either evolving over time, how different kinds of programs were affecting their achievement and their growth, the 2 being different. So that was, and coincidentally, of the people at the table, all 4 of those kids were taught by a teacher at the table. So that was really nice because we also get to learn about them in that very sort of personal way as learners. So just this past winter, when the kids took their winter STAR exams, we took all of the 6th graders who scored in the category of exceeding expectations. There were 125 of them. And the average SGP across the 125 of them was 68. If we took them by percentile rank and we looked at the 98th and the 99th percentile, 48 of the students fell into that category. And of those 48, there was an average SGP score of 77. When we went to 95 to the 97th percentile rank, 23 students fell into that category, and their average SGP score was 66. When we looked at the percentile rank of 95 and below, there are 54 students, and the average SGP was at 60. And then we asked that group of kids, how many of you would say that you're not challenged in your math class? And it was only 47 students who said that they were not, and yet those 47 students had an average SGP score of 68. So when we looked at that, we said, we've got 125 kids here with some really high SGP scores. And so it's hard for us to make an argument that they're not being challenged in that classroom. And, we could certainly say, well, maybe it's because they're going outside and getting some Kumon or Russian School of Math or tutoring or whatever. But if we went back to that slide, right here, you can sort of see that the numbers of kids who are falling into Russian School of Math or tutoring, it's not really a high number, and these numbers, as we said before, could be kids who are overlapping. So of these 125 students, I feel like there is a level of challenge for them, for sure, based on the kinds of growth that we're seeing. And then we looked at a screenshot. So what you're seeing is a screenshot. We looked at the kids' spring of 2023 MCAS scores. So we took the students who were currently exceeding in the winter, and we said, let's put them all in a spreadsheet, and then let's go back to the spring of 2023 and see what their MCAS scores were. And in theory, your STAR score and your MCAS score should be very neatly aligned. They typically correlate nicely. And we can see how many of those kids were in the blue, and this is really just starting at the top of the list and taking a screenshot, in the spring of 23. So by the winter of 24, all of those kids who you see on that screen right there, all the ones who were blue, had turned to green. So we still said that's got to mean that those kids are seeing challenge in a heterogeneously grouped grade 6 math class, traditional grade 6 math. So little by little we were saying, maybe there really is no need for some kind of leveling here. And then we went to the blue. There were 90 students, and the average SGP among those 90 was 50. And when we took the 89th percentile rank, there were 52 kids with an SGP score of 53. If we did the 70th to the 79th percentile rank, there were 24 kids whose SGP score was 50. If you were below the 70th percentile, there were 14 kids whose SGP was 41. And then the number of kids who said that they weren't challenged in this group were 12, and of those 12, their SGP score was 51. And then we got to the partially meeting expectations kids, and this, I think, is where we were met with our surprise. There are 47 students who were partially meeting expectations, and the average SGP score across those 47 was 31. So if you think about them in sort of a rank order, they were falling into the bottom 31% in the state of Massachusetts when they are being compared to their like peers in the state. So they're not being compared to kids who have tested super high historically. They are being compared to kids who have the exact same testing data, demographics that they do. So the kids in the 60 to 69th percentile, there were 6 of them with an average SGP score of 34. The kids who are in the 50 to 59th, there were 16 of them with an average SGP score of 41. In the below 50th percentile, there were 25 kids with an average SGP score of 24. And the number of kids who said that they didn't feel like they were challenged, there were 2 of them with an average SGP score of 18. So this is where we got to the place where we said, are we meeting the needs of our partially meeting expectations students? If you think that there are 3 grade 6 math teachers, and they each teach 5 different periods, there are 15 sections running across the middle school. So if we take those 47 students and we sprinkle them out across 15 sections, what we're seeing is that we may have 3 students or 4 students or only 2 students in each one of those classrooms. So there are so many of your kids who, 125 of them, who are exceeding expectations and 90 who are meeting. So now you've got 315 kids who are at benchmark or in some cases way, way above. And then you've got kids who are below benchmark. And we've got them all in that same place. And I'm wondering, based on this, we were all wondering, based on these numbers, if we were meeting those needs in a classroom of, say, 22 or 23 students. We don't have enormously high class sizes, because we're just not seeing that growth that we would want to see there. So then if we went to our kids who were the yellows in the winter, and we said, where were they in the spring of 2023? Some of those kids, of the 47 who tested yellow, had been blue in the spring, and we said, oh gosh, like those are kids who have dropped from meeting expectations to partially meeting expectations. One of the students up there is a kid who had gone from not meeting expectations to partially meeting expectations. So pink in that group is good news, blue is not as good news. And the white would mean that that was a student who had no history. So what we started to, let's take a look at our not meeting expectations students as well. We had 9 students who were not meeting expectations, and their average SGP score was 23. And maybe it's interesting to take a look at our kids who fell in that percentile rank below 10. There were only 3 of them, but their average SGP score was 35. And so you can see the student, there was 1 student who fell into that percentile rank of 15 to 18, and that student's average SGP score was 1. So landing in like the, if you took all of those peers in Massachusetts and said how many of them were, operating in that very first or lowest percentile, there is 1 student there. These are also kids who, because they're not meeting benchmark, are very often getting sort of a double dose of math. And I don't know, Matt, if you want to talk any more about the profile of those particular students.
So the students performing in this category, they would typically have their grade 6 math class with all of their peers, a class that meets every day of school. And then in addition to that, they would be supported by our, we call it our foundations math section, which is a class that meets every other day. So they're getting, on some days of the rotation, two blocks of math.
Wait, can I just ask, when do they get that second dose every other day? Is it a Hiller block, or is it a?
It's delivered in place of one of their related arts offerings.
Okay.
So then we wondered, are we seeing sort of the same thing across the board if we looked at, say, high school scores by those categories? And so Carla Crisafulli took all of the high school students and said, if we took the exceeding the standard students by the Winter Star at the high school, Yeah, I just want to make sure. No, I'm sorry, that's grade 10 MCAS, not Winter Star. The average SGP score for exceeding the standard at the high school for grade 10 MCAS in 2023 was just about 58. And the meeting was at 48, and partially meeting was at 57. And so what that says is that those kids must be getting mathematical instruction that is super targeted to meet their need and then needs. And then Carla wanted to point out that if we looked at the not meeting and we said it was at 21, because of the super low numbers, she said that that would not be statistically significant, so we should not be looking at that just in terms of the low sample size. At any rate, there is evidence coming out of the high school and even coming out of the middle school that when we really target the instruction for our partially meeting kids, then we're going to get better growth. But we are also people who believe that they should not be segregated into a classroom by themselves. They should be in classrooms with their peers who are exceeding the standard and meeting the standard. And we also still believe in some of the research that shows us that when you put kids into a classroom with kids who are higher performing, all boats will rise. What we did start wondering about is that if you were partially meeting and you were exceeding and you were partially meeting in the below 50th percentile, or you were exceeding and you were in the 99th percentile, was that gap just too big? Vygotsky talks about the zone of proximal development. Was that gap too big? And if you made the gap smaller, would the targeted instruction be better suited to all the students in the room, the students who are partially meeting, and exceeding? So what we know now is that we have ample evidence that students do make greater gains when the disparity within a single classroom is not as wide. We do know that we're making changes, and Matt's going to talk about those tonight. And the third thing that we know is that all of our 6th grade students are going to get curriculum that is based on grade 6 math standards. And so this is what is proposed right now. In 6th grade, there are 3 teams, a red team, a yellow team, and a blue team. So you see them kind of outlined on your screen. If we said that of the 125 students, for example, and these are all artificial numbers because we don't really know the numbers of our rising 5th graders and how they would fit into something like this. But if we took out 25 students, for example, on each one of those teams and created another math class that was based on grade 6 standards, and if they're learning grade 6 standards, there's still the ability for a student to leave that class and go to a traditional math 6, or leave traditional math 6 and go to that other class, which we are calling math 6+. Once you do that, you can see the new makeup of a classroom. So if you have 17 students remaining who are exceeding expectations, and you have 30 students left who are meeting expectations, and 15 students left who are partially meeting expectations, you've got more of a breakdown where you've got, your kids who are meeting expectations are sort of 2 to 1, or maybe it's, 1 meeting expectation for every partially, 1 meeting for every exceeding. When you take this, you can break them down into groups of 21, 21, and 20, and separate them out so that you've got equal amounts in each one of them. So for example, if you took your 15, there would be 5 here, 5 here, and 5 here. If you took your meeting, there'd be 10 here, 10 here, and 10 here. If you took your exceeding, you would have 5 and 6 and 6. And so you could spread them out and make something that is really, truly heterogeneous, and not something that is going to create a disparity that has shown us that our partially meeting kids aren't making great growth. And so this is something that we intend to try for a year or 2. Because it will be brand new, there can be an implementation dip, so we want to carry it out for a couple of years and see what's happening. It doesn't mean that we won't be making tweaks along the way. The other thing that we took a look at is what would happen with our 6 kids or our 9 kids, however many we have, who are not meeting expectations. As Matt indicated, they are typically taught in a foundational level kind of course. And we pulled these purple boxes out of this because it doesn't mean that we are going to stop doing that double dosing for some of our kids who are partially and not meeting or partially meeting. You can see that, and that doesn't mean that a not meeting expectation student couldn't be in this group as well. But when we started to break it out, the double dose is something that is super helpful. I mean, a lot of the time, what is an obstacle to students' learning is if they just had more time with the subject matter, they would fare better. So we just colored that one purple and said it wouldn't matter if you were a student who was partially meeting or not meeting, if you needed the double dose, you could, that was still available to you, which is why we chose that highlighting. Some of the things that we had to consider, that what would we name this course, and I think Matt and I thought about it, and Matt Cotter was part of the thinking, and Mr. LeBrod was part of the thinking. We thought for a long time, and none of us was coming up with anything we loved. And the 6th grade math teachers got together and said, why couldn't we just call this Math Plus? And we kind of fell in love with it. We've thought about criteria for placing. We want to be very clear that for the Math Plus students, we will be maintaining a lot of the current curriculum because we have evidence that it works. But there will need to be the writing of new curriculum. And for our students who are in the traditional Math 6 classroom with exceeding, meeting, and partially meeting, there needs to be continued differentiation of that traditional math classroom. So we differentiate it now, but we will not stop doing that, and we will really think hard about targeting the instruction to match the needs of the learners in each one of those classrooms. And so, if there's anything that I missed, jump right in.
No, I don't think so. I think it's just important to note that the grade 6 math teachers at the middle school, they're excellent.
Yes.
They're really fabulous teachers. And you can walk into their classroom on any different day and see the differentiation that they're providing to all of their students. So they might all be working on the same concept, work on the same topic, but different small groups of them will be engaged in different activities based on their level of readiness. So I'm hopeful that with this plan, that the proportion or balance within the room will still lend itself to that differentiation, while at the same time providing a little bit more time, attention, support for the students who are currently performing in that partially meeting expectation category. So that's, I'm hopeful with this plan.
Can we pause to have some questions on that?
Absolutely.
Piece specifically. I don't know if other people have.
I had
Yep.
I just want to make sure I understand which class the Math Plus class is. Based on like a couple slides back where you're having the color,
Yep.
the team colors.
Yes.
Is it
It's,
the purple and reds?
no, it's color coded in green, because green was the color from the previous slide that was exceeding expectations. It's that green.
Yes,
So the
these kids
largest
with
cohort.
Oh, so there's a 25 student Math Plus class, which is all exceeding expectation students. So that's
Yes,
one class that is not heterogeneous.
That's correct.
Correct,
Yep.
right, so like if I were a 6th grade math teacher, and I were the 6th grade math teacher on the red team, I could have a section of math that had, and remember, the numbers are artificial, 25 students in an exceeding expectations class. 25 is high, but just, it's there. And then 21 students in 3 other classes that were the blend of heterogeneous, exceeding, meeting, and partially meeting. And then I could maybe even have a section of foundational math, for example, but it's just to talk about what a teacher could teach. Right now, the teachers don't actually teach that foundational math, they all teach 5 sections of grade 6 math. Traditional, regular, old, ordinary grade 6 math.
So so I understand what you're trying to do, which is decrease the breadth between students. But what the first thought that pops into head is you have other exceeding expectation students that are going to be in a heterogeneous class. How do you then explain which ones get into math class versus which ones are in a heterogeneous class? Like where does that split happen?
So the Hopkins School, because they are all fifth grade students now, has started to compile data of these students as mathematicians. So we have things like historical STAR scores, historical MCAS scores, and naturally our teachers know our kids as mathematicians. There is something that happens in grade 5 called Beast Academy. And Beast Academy is an online tool that if you are a supersonic mathematician, like one of maybe 30-ish at a grade level, you can engage in that. So in order to become a Beast Academy mathematician, we have sort of I don't know if I would call it a rubric, but like a little bit of you're a kid who just thirsts for more, and so some of it has to do with like, kind of you identify as a mathematician, you love it, you're passionate about it.
Is that's 30 kids across the fifth grade though, correct?
For Beast Academy.
For Beast Academy, so, and then looking at the 75, I guess, and right, this would be my question, I don't want to put words into your mouth, but there's gotta be a fluid piece in terms of like, so 1 year's grade 6, there's not a set target of.
Correct.
You get this score and that puts you into the exceeding expectations, you get this score and you're in the heterogeneous thing. Are there kids then who are in the heterogeneous thing, in the exceeding, that could have been in the Math Plus class? And while there's flexibility between them, my assumption, just based on having seen how leveling in other grades works, is that plus group is able to move at a faster pace, because, and that would make it then more difficult for the kids to be able to flex between the two, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So I think it's important that the pacing remain as similar as possible. So for me, a simple way to look at it is, it's possible that on Monday, for example, everyone in grade 6, every math student in grade 6 is introduced to the same learning concept. Everyone is delivered that same lesson on that day. And then over the course of the week, you would see that the students in the grade 6 Math Plus class would be able to go deeper into that content, because we want them to leave grade 6 all with the same ability to move to whatever class they're most ready for in grade 7. So the pacing needs to be as similar, as close as possible. So you might get more practice with some, less complex problems in the grade 6 math class over the course of that week, while you're in the plus section. If those students are demonstrating mastery at a quicker pace, they would go deeper into that content, either through applications, more complex problems, real life scenarios. There's a lot of possibilities there.
So do each of the 6th grade math teachers have have a math class and a 6th grade math class?
Yeah,
or
that's the intent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the flexibility is not within a school year. It's not that when you're working on one unit, and I just imagine the way middle school schedules work, it would be, so if we're, in different classes here, and Lori and I are, she's in the flexible group at the exceeding plus group, and I'm in the heterogeneous group. And the next unit, something can't change within the unit, it would have to wait until 7th grade. It's not flexible.
I would hope that we'd land someplace in the middle, to be honest, where it might not happen within a unit, but if a student is demonstrating readiness or demonstrating challenge at the end of a trimester, at the end of a month because we're learning about those kids over the first 3 weeks of the school year. So I would imagine some flexibility during the year for students to move between sections.
That's exactly my question, is not less so on the unit, but that there are
Correct.
points at which kids could move between.
That's in keeping with our practice in the other grades too. There is some movement
So I
in
don't,
sections.
I do have a middle schooler, and I have had other middle schoolers. I don't recall kids moving between classes like that mid-year. Is that a frequent occurrence that
No,
it
it's not,
would be?
it's not frequent, but
Okay.
it does happen.
Okay. I'm gonna sit and think for a minute while others have questions. I'm trying to wrap my brain a little bit around this, because this is different than what I was expecting.
Likewise.
Okay.
Was it intentional to, I know these are illustrative numbers, but were you intentionally trying to keep the class sizes smaller for the hybrid classes?
Yes. Yeah.
So
I mean,
it's
these
25
numbers
is a
are
lot.
smaller than what they'll be next year, but,
I mean, but skew it so that you're
Yes.
pulling more kids out.
Yeah, I don't know if we were skewing it so much as they were earning it in some ways too.
So we're taking the largest cohort, that was 125 or so students in the exceeding,
Yes, if,
and
you
we're
know,
taking like half of, or little, no, not half, a little less than half, or sorry, a little more than half. And we're pulling
Yeah.
them into the top.
60%, right?
Yeah,
And
thank
now
you.
you're asking
According
us
to
do
this.
math.
I know. So, it's interesting. It's how I feel about this. I think I have to think about it. I mean,
I'm hoping that it's going to be good for kids. Like, and I know that people are saying, are you doing this for the kids who are the exceeding expectation students? And when you go back and look at their growth scores, it's not the exceeding expectations kids who need this to grow. It's really our partially meeting expectations kids who need this to grow. But we're kind of hoping that if you're an exceeding expectation kid and you're thirsty and hungry for math, this will give you a chance to do that deep dive and really roll up your sleeves and have that moment in the day where you can do your math thing.
So I think the thing that you likely will hear about it is it going to hold back my exceeding expectations kid to be in a heterogeneous classroom? Based on what you were demonstrating in the evidence of what is currently happening, the answer should be no.
Right.
I think the other question was interesting for me too, is that I have a rising sixth grader, so I'm somewhat invested in it, but what I'm also thinking about is, so I'm forgetting what seventh grade math is, and it's crazy because I have an eighth grader, but I'm forgetting already what seventh grade math was, but it shouldn't dictate the next step up in seventh grade math. That will be dependent just on their overall scores.
yeah,
We
that's why.
agree with that.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Sorry, so that's why the similarity in the pacing is important. So you're not, you're not coming out of one of the classes having been exposed to 12 of the grade 6 math concepts and coming out of the other class with 9
Yeah.
That can't happen.
It seems hard to imagine, though, that if the plus group is getting more in-depth on the same topics, that they would not come out of sixth grade, going into the seventh grade groupings at an advantage for success in seventh grade math, which is leveled.
I think they probably already had an advantage.
Well,
I mean, they're
sure,
already.
but I guess they have an advantage based on it, perhaps whatever it is that got them into the exceeding expectations piece. But we're building on that advantage if we're offering them more, as opposed to the comparable group that was also exceeding expectations.
Right, except, I feel, see, bless you, I think probably, although I don't know what your criteria are, probably some of those kids in the top have an aptitude for understanding math that is probably going to give them an advantage either way. And what I like about this, and I like that it's not advancing them, but going deeper, if the teachers are ready for that. I like a class that can take that math energy and that readiness and go deeper and sort of serve the kids who otherwise probably, wouldn't have that opportunity. And it's something not just, well, you can just go do these extra computer-based problems on your own. This is a class with a teacher who can continue to stimulate a natural interest just by going deeper, apply. A lot of like the math competitions, develop problems that apply the same concepts. It's the same grade, but you have to really think through how to take what you've learned and apply it. And those things probably would fit very nicely in the top tier. So you're not really going anywhere else, but you've got the basics and you're ready to apply it, or maybe work in groups or go a little faster with how you're thinking. But not going faster in terms of getting to 9th grade math at the end of 6th grade. So I like that.
I like that piece, but I guess it's taking me a little bit to wrap my head around that green group that's in the heterogeneous. And are there some of those kids that would have benefited from having those opportunities as well?
The teachers in the very early stages
Yeah.
of this curriculum planning, one thing that they keep voicing is their commitment to providing some of those extension application
Yes.
experiences to the green group in the heterogeneous setting as well. That's more in line with what they're currently doing.
That's a good kind of circle back to where we are right now in I think we do have outstanding educators and teach grade 6, all of them, math, to get kids where they need to be and to offer the extensions for those who need it, but also to offer a little bit of extra support for those who need it in that time. So, sounds like the grade 6 teachers really embrace this, the 6th grade math. What about the 7th and 8th grade? Have they had the opportunity to preview?
Well, the 6th grade teachers take great pride in their ability to differentiate for their kids. And I think when you take a group of people that are passionate about teaching, it's not just about the subject matter, it's about the well-being of their students. So with this change, they're going to be looking after their students even more, to make sure they're getting what they're needed.
I 100% believe that.
I think when we were looking at this in the committee and saw that partially meeting group lower SGP scores than we would like, there was concern there.
Yeah.
So I think to say that they're fully embracing this idea might be a little overstated. They want to make sure that this works for their
Okay.
kids. They're willing to give it a try. So like I said, I want to say that.
Okay, so I see.
Thank you.
They are willing to give this a try. They like it in some way.
There are definitely aspects
the
of it.
opportunities
Yep,
it does.
definitely aspects of it they like.
I guess, had the 7th and 8th grader math teachers also had the opportunity to
Not at
weigh
the same,
in on-
not at the
okay.
same level as depth, I think.
Okay, but something.
Yeah, there's an awareness there. Big change in 7th grade has been, over the last year, getting more students into that pre-algebra class. So 7th grade is pre-algebra and grade 7 math. Where pre-algebra does all of the grade 7 curriculum, but extends into 8th grade curriculum. There's a very high percentage of our 7th graders that are in that class. So they're feeling that momentum. And I think they want to give as many students a shot at that class as we can. So again, that similarity of pacing, making sure that everyone in grade 6 has exposure to the concepts, we'll just keep that work moving forward.
Can I ask you, I know, I really appreciate the analysis that led you here. And I know that the partially meeting growth percentiles were not where we want them to be. Did you guys also have an option where instead of the green box, you had like just a yellow box? I think I know the answer to why you wouldn't do that, but I'm just asking in terms of shrinking the gaps between students in one room so that it's, more focused.
Yeah.
And I think Dr. Kavanaugh commented on why, but I'm just curious where we're trying to target that yellow box group. Was there a conversation about pulling the yellow boxes into their own dedicated space?
Not at the same length, no. I'll be honest, that type of separation doesn't feel great to me.
Right.
So,
Well, I know it seems like our values, and I espouse these too, is that it helps the all boats rise situation where you need a mixed group so that everybody benefits. I just, it seems like an obvious question someone might ask, well, if you really want to help those folks, well, why aren't they getting the targeted instruction? Like, people might think they're missing out, so I just wanted to understand.
And the ones who need that will get that in their double dose.
Correct, okay. Jack, does this make you have any reaction thinking about this?
Not really. I just remember when we went into 7th grade that like the leveling allows you to sort of be around people who are similar in like your learning style. So like I know that even like sometimes in my math class today, like I'll be working with a partner and they'll be a lot more advanced than I am or a lot like faster at solving the problems, and it doesn't really allow you to fully like learn the concept or like develop those same skills. So I think it's really helpful to start at a younger age, putting kids together with peers who have the same intellectual like mathematics skills as them, and I think that the leveling would do that well, although I can see how like the split between exceeding expectations in two groups could be sort of like faulty. Like if the kids in the like 17 exceeding expectations, would they be able to get to the pre-algebra level in 7th grade as well?
Yeah.
Is that that's allowed? Okay.
Yeah.
Or possible? Sorry.
Yeah, this will not alter any of the criteria that move you to pre-algebra in grade 7.
Okay.
So the one last thing I just wanted to comment on, and clearly I have an N of 1 for a 5th grader this year, but like in thinking about it, what I've heard anecdotally from some of the 5th graders is they're very aware of the kids that are potentially doing Russian math or Kumon and how fast they're picking up concepts even in 5th grade. And it can be daunting to raise your hand at the developmental age they're at to demonstrate that you don't know something when others in your class are knowing it. So what I do see as beneficial in this is maybe allowing for more of even what Jack was just saying, of people that may be similarly situated as you and not feeling so much pressure to be as great as everybody else in your class, where there's not that differentiation today in 5th grade, for instance. And I'm not at all saying like we should be moving this down. I mean, the hard part for me as a committee member and talking through some of these concepts 8-9 years ago is that we were super focused on integration. I think this still allows for integration, but that's it feels a little bit like a shift from that, but I still see how you're working that in. So I'm sounding conflicted because I am a bit conflicted, but I absolutely see what you're trying to accomplish. I think where I think you're gonna get pushback is on parents that have exceeding expectations, kids that don't make it into the plus.
Yeah.
Because I think you're gonna be helping your partially meeting expectations kids by having meeting expectations kids in there. So the question's gonna be, why wouldn't you just have all the greens together? I don't actually necessarily think that's beneficial for everybody but and I do know what you're talking about. There is differentiation between the kid that just happens to be good at math and the kid that loves math.
Yes.
But whether or not you're really truly able to accommodate that line in this methodology will remain to be seen. I think what would be really interesting is to see where the scores go next year, to see like what you're seeing in trends.
Yep.
So I don't want to sound discouraging, Mr. Lefebvre. I truly understand how much work has gone into this, just from like a parent aspect of thinking about it. It's multifaceted from a parental perspective, because you're not only worried about your kids' scores, but like how they're feeling about themselves and where they fit in that classroom, and they all know. Like, just because you name it Math Plus now, like within 3 weeks, everyone's gonna know what Math Plus is. So that's my only comment. But I do really appreciate all of the research behind it, because it was really helpful in understanding what made you move in this direction?
And, sorry. Go ahead. I was gonna say, you know, I think a few of us have been through a number of changes in the math curriculum over time, so it is important that we stick to whatever we're gonna do for more than, and you're saying like scores next year. I think what's very troubling for families is flip-flopping.
Yeah.
And not giving one plan enough time to actually take root. So like Lori, I'm worried about if it's hard to understand why your child is in the 6+ versus the 6. If you're in that green box and you're not able to understand the placement, it's going to be very hard to keep on the path of this program with parents who are, if you have, 17 times 3 parents who are pushing back and not understanding, it's going to be hard. So the criteria are going to have to be important, and we have to be committed to it if we think this is the right thing to do for at least 2 years, as you said, because it just takes time. And the only other thing I would say is I think your point about how students feel about themselves when they are either struggling to keep up or, they always know the answer and they get ostracized for that being that as well. Like it's really hard it's really hard as a student, period, but in these like 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, these years are particularly tender for trying to figure out how you fit in with your peer group and how you behave in your classroom within your peer group, and those, the kids are very sensitive to that. So, I think making slightly more homogeneous groups is probably going to help everybody, but this is going to be a very challenging program to roll out and keep the community clear on what you're doing and how it's being executed. So it's going to be tough.
I would agree with that. I agree with both of you. And I have a wide enough gap between the ages of my kids. I have one child who went through the 6th grade math who was back when it was leveled, and there was different levels that were not like this at all, really. And I guess that's what took me a little bit to understand exactly how this was going. And then kind of the shift, and I think like Amanda referenced, it does get a little bit of an uproar whenever the shift is because people don't understand it. They feel like maybe their kid's not getting what they need. I've also had kids with very different learning profiles specific to math. I've had a kid who it was their thing to go to Russian math, loved doing that as an activity, not as something that we pushed as a parent, but loved math that much. And then, kids who have not been as enthusiastic about it. So I'm not an educator, obviously, but I rely heavily on, the educators and building leaders to be able to come back and to recommend what is going to serve our students, all of them.
And honestly, looking at this, I know there are going to be multiple factors that decide placement.
That's right.
So I think because this chart has just one factor, and the one factor is duplicated in 2 boxes, makes it seem like it's the same group of kids. But I think it's the other factors, and I think that is what is creating the reaction from the committee, because I think it looks like you're taking one group called green, and you're just splitting them.
Right.
But that really isn't a homogeneous group. First of all, it's a lot of kids. It's 125 of them, or more, depending on the grade. And it's the other factors that, really define the student as a math student, in terms of learning style and ability to, the pacing of, it's more than just did they get an A or did they get exceeds. There's a whole bunch that goes into that. Mm-hmm. So I think maybe as you communicate this out, not labeling it like that. I think that labeling is misleading because it makes it seem, not that you're trying to mislead, but I think it makes it seem like all those green boxes are the same. And they're probably
They're
really
not.
not.
Correct.
Yeah, there are different types of learners,
Yeah.
right? There's obviously a range there.
Yeah.
If you're a student currently in the green, that's in the heterogeneous group, that's really an incredible opportunity for you to gain some academic confidence in math and stand out in that class as well. That's another, potential outcome for this that could be great for that pocket of learners.
I may have missed something. What differentiates the 25 student, whatever, who get Math Plus, and the ones who are also considered exceeding expectations, who are in the mixed group?
Well, so the students that are in the green, that exceeding expectations is a range, right?
Right.
Of scores, so, and the folks at Hopkins in grade 5 are determining other criteria, they're looking at the learners in front of them.
So this will all be score-based? With other factors added in?
So this is, what you're looking at here is the score from one assessment. So there's gonna be another assessment factored in here as a placement criteria, performance in class, participation in class. So you could look at that as a score, but it's really, it's like a variety of placement criteria that would go into this.
Yeah, what they've done is they have taken the historical STAR scores and historical MCAS scores. So that's actually a very big part of the determining factors. So when you asked about like how qualitative is it, those qualitative pieces are there.
Okay. And so a recommendation would be made that the student gets Math Plus and this student is
Yeah,
here.
it will really be a number at the end of the day that would put you into that space.
But what you're saying is that those two assessments are only part of it. There's other
Yes.
parts.
Yep.
Yep.
And so I think what Amanda was saying was on point, and likely, actually, I would highly encourage you when you do the upcoming sixth grade parent orientation to really like hone in on that piece of it, because if any parents are watching tonight and look at this presentation and not taking that part into consideration, then I think that is where the misunderstanding will come from.
Yes.
And I 100% agree that there is a differentiator between those two green groups. We're just not showing them here because we're looking at it from a different perspective. But knowing what those differentiators are is gonna help explain.
Yes, when our kids take the MCAS, the highest score you can get is a 560. So anyone who scores from 530 to 560 would be considered exceeding expectations. But the 560 is a very different mathematician than the 530.
Right.
This
So
is
do we have to
exciting.
vote or anything at this point? or-
We're gonna vote on the next piece, which is the program of studies, which incorporates this.
Understood,
Thank you
sorry.
for all
So
of
we're like
this.
keeping you here a
Yeah.
lengthy time just to talk through this.
That was, I think, a lengthier piece that we anticipated, so I apologize for that.
That's fine. So in the program of studies, so we've talked through the entire document in the previous meeting. So page 6 is the mathematics section. So really what we're looking at is a section here that we've rewritten to include the course name Grade 6 Math Plus, a couple of basic word changes, but keeping to the language that I presented last time, designed to be rigorous and focus on these 4 critical areas. People are able to see, okay. Because those will remain true for both of these courses. So what follows after that is the paragraph that reads, students placed in grade 6 Math Plus experience the 4 critical areas listed above. Concepts will be introduced at a similar pace, and students in both classes will have access to enrichment and extension problems. Grade 5 students who have demonstrated a readiness for more depth and application of content are placed in grade 6 Math Plus. That's the change from the last meeting.
Okay. All right.
So who makes the recommendation? Is it the 5th grade teachers? Or is it in concert with the 6th grade teachers?
So just to be very careful, the 5th grade teachers will have a small piece of the input, but a lot of it will just be score-based. So, I don't want people to call their grade 5 teacher and say,
Oh.
you didn't put my
Yeah.
child there. But they're not the ones who are putting their.
No,
I mean, it's-
sorry, that
it's
wasn't
scores
my
that already
intention.
exist.
I was thinking more along the lines of, there is so much that goes into placing kids each year. I know that process it's amazing to me. But there'll be input there, like in terms of knowledge that you have a kid that loves math and everything
right.
about it, you know, those types of things,
So
that type of input.
Right, the
Yeah.
placement will happen in grade 5, but the placement criteria is what will place the
Understood.
student. And the grade 6
Yeah,
teacher
no.
doesn't know anything about them as learners.
Yes.
All of a sudden, I just got every 5th grade teacher.
No,
exam.
you're right.
Was not the intention.
No, they're probably thanking you for saying that so that we could clarify.
Maybe I missed this last time you were here, but did you extend the name of the Honors Algebra 1 to grade 8 Honors Algebra 1? Or was that always in grade 8 Advanced Algebra 1? Because one of the questions I had last time was, you had Honors Algebra 1, I thought it was just that. I like it with the grade 8 modifier because we have the high school Honors Algebra 1, which is a different class.
We have not changed the course titles for grade 8.
You haven't? Do you typically call it grade 8? Did you use how does it appear in someone's record?
I think I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
So in the course title, like on a report card or
Yeah.
schedule in Power School, the word grade 8 is not there. It just says Honors Algebra or Advanced Algebra.
And it's probably a minor point, but it seems like within one district, if we have 2 classes that are called Honors Algebra 1 and they're different, it could be confusing. So I didn't know, I know we have that at the high school, and
Yeah.
I didn't know if there was an opportunity to distinguish the names so that they truly are not called the same thing. I don't know if you had talked about that at all.
But do they ever have the opportunity to be confused? Like, for instance, you wouldn't have the grade 8 honors algebra on the high school list. Like, they both have their own separate programs and studies. So are you saying, because I think I remember what you were talking about, that when someone outside the district coming into the district, how would they know whether or not their kid was eligible for honors algebra in the 8th grade?
Well, I think they said, that placement either in or out is a complex discussion anyway. I think I was just thinking, it just doesn't, I think maybe in my purest sense, it doesn't seem right to have 2 classes that aren't actually the same, with the same name.
That probably really hard algebra.
Well, because this is a
Really
mix,
hard
it's sort of, as I understood, it was a mix of some grade 8 and some algebra, is that, and then,
It is, yeah, they finish whatever grade 8 content
yeah,
was not covered in pre-algebra.
yeah.
I understand the question.
Yeah.
Particularly having some high school experience. I just don't see a situation where they would ever be looked at like side by side.
Yeah.
So if you were looking at a high school student's transcript, you wouldn't be seeing Algebra 1 and it's indicated with a high school course number, so.
Okay.
I could bring that, I'm happy to bring it back to the math teachers. I wouldn't change it tonight without their input, so.
Right, no, yeah, I had
I
passed the
understand.
question along,
Yeah.
but because I wasn't.
I remember seeing it in the chart
Yeah.
last time we were here. Yeah.
Okay, so if there are no other questions regarding the program of studies, is there somebody who would like to make a motion related to the program of studies?
I move to approve the Hopkins Middle School 2024 to 2025 program of studies.
Okay, motion by Susan, is there a second on that?
Second.
Second by Lori, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay. Thank you, and extra thank you for indulging us in the
You're welcome.
level of questions that we had to make.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so that brings us then into liaison roles.
Anytime.
We had talked about having an alternate liaison for CPAC. I know, for example, that there is a CPAC meeting coming up on Tuesday night. I have not spoken with Adam as to whether or not he's able to go, but I think if we have an alternate, it would certainly be, if the alternate also wants to go to meetings, it's not a quorum, so both could go. The Tuesday one, I think, is at the same time as the elementary school building committee and a couple of other things going on.
What time is it Tuesday night and where? Is it one of their
Seven,
sip and
it's not, it's a regular, let me look it up because I have.
Oh, I think there's gonna be an advocate there.
Okay, let me just. I believe it is an overview of the new IEP. It's a Zoom meeting, and it's at 7 PM. But this is beyond just this one. It would be to be able to be a liaison, that would be an alternate for when Adam, proactively to be able to have somebody, if Adam's not able to make it, just because we've really made a commitment to our CPAC of wanting to make sure that we have school committee coverage at that. Some of the other meetings I know are in the morning, they're mostly Monday mornings, right?
Monday mornings, definitely, yes. Once a month.
I would be interested in being an alternate if nobody else is.
Okay.
I think you'd make an excellent alternate.
Think you would make an excellent alternate. My schedule would make it difficult for Monday mornings consistently. Sometimes I could if I knew in advance, but if it was a.
That day would be easy for me.
Okay. Good.
Sounds good.
All right, is there somebody who would like to make a motion to appoint Susan as our, actually, it would be good to have a motion, I think, to appoint Susan as an alternate liaison member for CPAC.
So moved.
Motion by Lori,
Second.
second by Amanda. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, congratulations. That then brings us into reports. Jack, we'll start with you.
Hello, everybody. I would like to start my report with a wonderful announcement. Finally, on March 2nd, just last week, the Hopkinton Quiz team participated in their qualifying match against Andover High School, which they won in the final seconds by a score of 330 to 320. The Hillers will advance, and their next matchup will take place on April 13th. Now is also an important time at the high school, as course selection process is now open. Beginning Tuesday, March 5th at 2:30 p.m., the online request portal in PowerSchool will be open for students to enter their course requests for the 2023-2024 school year. The portal will close on Wednesday, March 13th at 5 p.m. The HHS Drama Ensemble is also presenting their winter show, Game of Tiaras, a dark comedy loosely based on William Shakespeare's King Lear and Game of Thrones, set against a backdrop of power-hungry Disney princess types. The show will take place March 7th to March 9th and will be the last show for the beloved drama ensemble director, Valerie. Performance times are Thursday at 4 and Friday and Saturday at 7. Some quick congratulations include our National Merit Scholarship Program finalists, Abigail Baskin, Amanda Zai, Bableen Gill, Zachary Krimgold, and Prisha Shrivastava. As well as a congratulations to the Hopkinton High School Hopkinetics robotics teams on competing in the Southern New England Championship. Team 2602B has now moved on to the VEX World Championships in Dallas, Texas. Lastly, important upcoming dates at the high school include spring athletics registration for the 2024 spring season. Registration will be open from now until Sunday, March 10th at midnight. The deadline for the Senior Capstone Experience applications is also Monday, March 11th. Thank you.
Isn't there a dance coming up?
Oh, there is one for the, I have it right here. For the, it's a sophomore and freshman semi-formal. It's on Friday, March 15th, and it's from 6 to 9 p.m. in the Athletic Center. Students can buy their tickets at lunch during this week.
I was also thinking, like, were you feeling left out of course selection?
Oh, no. I always had my options ahead of time for my siblings.
You've had a lot of wins at that high school recently. I mean, jazz band,
Yeah.
Tulsa, robotics.
I
lots
didn't know
of
which
good
ones to
things.
choose. I could have gone on and on.
I know.
The play. Can you go to a box office and get tickets?
You buy tickets at the door. days.
Okay, I just see that looks like you can buy them online too.
Oh, you can as well.
I just wondered, I would like to go and would like to have a handicap seat, not for me, but.
She's asking you to personally get her.
I believe there are options for those. There should be.
Oh, yeah, should be.
Yeah. All right, thank you.
I was gonna say, Susan, I would help you, but I have to
No,
go
no,
to
no.
a 2-day conference starting tomorrow,
Ooh.
out of the
Get
district.
to. Don't have to, get to.
I get to go to
Get to. It's a delightful Saturday. All right, then, ready to move on
Okay.
into the superintendent's report.
Yes, here we go. Okay. So this is Superintendent's Report for March 7th, 2024. We will cover the Elmwood School naming and then also a little update or information, I guess, on the Hopkins School addition. So just to cover enrollment, as of today, March 7th, 2024, you can see where we are. We are at 4,241 students. Maybe a very interesting number for us is when we take the integrated preschool at 103, we have 6 kids who are now pending approval. So that will take us up to 109 students in the integrated preschool. I like to remind people that when Marathon opened, I think we had maybe in the first year 48, in the second year 53 students in that program. So it is just, you know, it is the place to be now. The other reason I drew the red box around the enrollment tonight is that you can see how many of the kids have come into a grade level and how many of the students have exited a grade level. So when you look at grades 1 to 6, you can see that our net gains are 9, 15, 12, 14, 13, and 11 at grades 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 respectively. So when people are saying, oh gosh, are we losing students? Now, to be fair, we are down, let's see, 1 here in the 8th grade. We are down 8 in the 9th grade, and that one is not necessarily a big anomaly because a lot of times as kids are leaving 8th grade, they make other choices like Keefe Tech or North Muskogee or some kind of private school. The grade 11, the -6 is an anomaly. But you can see our K to 6, our 1 to 6 is growing. We have no baseline for K. So as we continue to look at enrollment projections, if we look at the 23-24 school year, Dr. Wagman predicted, for grade 4 and 5, because we're looking at the Hopkins School, Dr. Wagman predicted 670 students. Today we're at 687. His prediction for the year 2030-31 is 780. If we look at the MSBA prediction, today it would be 696 for the MSBA, and today we're at 687, so we are just about 9 students behind the MSBA and about 17 students ahead of Dr. Wagman. If we look at the 10-year projected average, which is the methodology used by the MSBA, the prediction is that in the year 2032, or we should be at about 802 students in that building. So why, in addition to the Hopkins School, we started with 24 original classrooms. And we've recently had some questions about the capacity of the original Hopkins, which got Tim Person, our Director of Facilities, and me looking at some of the original drawings. And we've even gone back in time to look at some of the annual town reports from the late 1990s. So we started with an original 24 classrooms. You know that during the pandemic, we were adding 4 modular classrooms, and we have now converted 2 interior windowless reclaimed classrooms to become sort of general education classrooms. We have 30 classrooms today, general education classrooms today, and that doesn't count, you know, your special education spaces, where your school adjustment counselor serves students and those kinds of things. And 687 students, that's 334 in grade 4 and 353 in grade 5. What we should say out loud is that there are no more spaces like sort of physically large enough to make a classroom at the Elmwood School, at the Hopkins School. So, are people confused about space? Because people have asked questions. Why was it originally built for 600 students? And so when we went back to the architectural drawings, it does in fact say that the new Hopkinton Elementary School would be grades 4 and 5, and it would be built for 600 students and 60 staff. But remember, there were only 24 general education classrooms put into that building. So if we took the 24 classrooms and multiplied it by 25 students, we would get 600 kids. We don't typically put 25 students in a classroom. Hopkinton has made a commitment at that grade level to be about 22, 23 students. So when we take a look at the average of that, and we say 24 classrooms times 22.5 students, we get 540 students, and this is probably more like it in that particular building. I wanted to share this with you. This comes right out of the year that the Hopkins School opened from the annual town report. The new Edward Hopkins School opened its doors to students on September 2nd, 1998, under the leadership of Principal Martha Starr. The previous spring, a townwide opening ceremony was held, including state and town officials. Families came in droves to tour the beautiful and colorful school and to show their appreciation of this cutting-edge facility. As soon as the 1997-1998 school year ended, 5th and 6th grade teachers, along with the preschool teachers, moved their belongings over to their new home. Throughout the summer, teachers were here every day, readying their classrooms and planning instruction for the upcoming school opening. Last-minute installations, deliveries, and setups were completed in time for the first day of school. The enthusiasm and excitement mounted as all 17 buses, today we have 33, pulled up to the back of the school with 426 5th and 6th graders. An hour later, 39 preschoolers arrived at their private entrance. In total, we have 465 students and 65 full and part-time faculty shared with Elmwood and Hopkinton Middle School. So very interesting, I think, the numbers. And we are still doing a little bit of research into if it was planned for grades 4 and 5, why did it open originally to grades 5 and 6?
So what's funny to me is the preschool has been everywhere, except for the high school.
Yes.
So it is interesting that the full and part-time staff shared with Elmwood and Hopkinton Middle School.
Yes.
I'd be interested to see if a piece of this had to do with the construction of the high school and the shifting of the middle school.
Yes.
Yeah.
If you go to the 1999 annual town report, it will tell you that they opened for their second year just on the heels of, the vote for the high school. So, we talk about this all the time, space needs. Hopkins currently exceeds its design enrollment by 59 students, and this school is really not large enough to house 2 grades right now. Without us having to do 4 lunch waves, and they begin at 10:45 and end at 1:20. Without us using 2 interior windowless classrooms as general education spaces, without the library having been subdivided now, using temporary walls to sort of carve out new classrooms, and those classrooms are really for our most vulnerable learners. That's where we're doing a lot of small group instruction. We have dismantled the conference rooms for our counseling, and this is, of course, in a time of mental health challenges, and also for small group instruction. When we were looking at the map of the original Hopkins School, it's so funny because they had, DARE rooms, which were drug resistance rooms, and, it's just so funny to watch how things have changed over time. And those great big classrooms that we were using as science labs or as special education spaces, when we looked at those, they were called project rooms, and we asked people, what have they been used for over the years? They've been used for everything right down to sort of home economics, so.
But what's also interesting to me too is that every bullet point you have up there is exactly how we were describing Center School. The only difference is the decrepitness of Center School versus Hopkins. You're really, the space issues were the same. The administrators no longer had offices.
Yes.
You had all of those same constraints when we were building Marathon, so.
So it's interesting that you said it because we'll talk about sort of that decrepitness and the importance of Hopkins not being in that state. So as people are thinking about the renovation and addition to Hopkins, people are asking him, so why do we need science, technology, engineering, and math kinds of classrooms? And I thought it might be interesting to think about what science and technology looks like instructionally now. So this comes right out of the Massachusetts curriculum frameworks.
the Mass Curriculum Frameworks for Science, Technology, and Engineering state. Curriculum and instruction should instill wonder in students about the world around them through engaging and exciting learning experiences. Students should develop a passion about the natural and designed world and model the inquisitive, analytical, skeptical nature of science. These goals can only be achieved through a rich and varied STE curriculum that includes thoughtful, hands-on, and minds-on activities, laboratories, investigations, and design challenges. One of the things that Mr. LeBron has done in this past year is had someone to come in to do a real science audit of our programming K-5. And, you know, her early findings are that we really need to make sure that our kids have opportunities for hands-on. I did just take one example of a physical science grade 5 standard. Conduct an experiment to determine whether the mixing of 2 or more substances results in new substances with new properties, a chemical reaction or not a mixture. So kids need spaces to do that. They're not doing that in just general education classrooms. And while that's one example, I could have put literally scores of them on this slide. So those are the kinds of things that our kids need to be able to practice in a science, technology, engineering specific space. So maybe to Lori's earlier point, wait, no MSBA funding, because we know we've had that with the Marathon School and also now with the Elmwood Replacement School. And so when you visit the MSBA website, they are very clear to tell you that priority is given to school projects needed in the judgment of the board to replace or renovate a building which is structurally unsound or otherwise in a condition seriously jeopardizing the health and safety of school children where no alternative exists. And really, our Hopkins School, I mean, as you can see, is less than 25 years old, and our maintenance in the district is, you know, typically very good. So it's hard to say that our building is decrepit or structurally unsound or in some kind of condition that would seriously jeopardize the health of students. It is just not. And that's all I have for you on the Hopkins School tonight. I'm sure that we will have more sort of Hopkins fun as we go along. But now it is time to think about the Elmwood School and the naming process. So I'm going to run again through the complete collection of suggested names, partly because we did get 2 additional names since the last time we met, and I want to make sure that you have them on your radar. Again, they are divided by geographical and natural world and then other categories. So we have Acorn Elementary, Brookside Elementary, Charles River Elementary, Hay Lane Elementary, head of the Charles River School, Charles View Elementary, Chestnut Elementary, Crestwood Elementary, Evergreen Elementary, Forest Elementary, Harmony Hills Elementary, Hayden Elementary or Hayden Row Elementary, Headwaters Elementary, Hillside Elementary, Hilltop Elementary, Honey Hill Elementary, Nature's Nest Elementary, Soaring Elementary or Soaring Eagles Elementary, Tree City Elementary, Whitehall Elementary, Woodland Grove Elementary, and then connections to the Marathon or the Marathon School, Athens Elementary, Marathon Elementary, Relay Elementary, Start Line Elementary, named after people and groups of people, Amy Graham Phipps, E. Aubrey Doyle, Frederick Douglass Elementary or Douglas Elementary, Marion Harris, that's one of the new ones, so I highlighted that for you in orange. The Hoyt School, Judy Hoyt Elementary, Richard E. Hoyt School or the Hoyt Memorial School, Magunko Elementary, Mary B. Nealon, Michael Shepherd Elementary, Patriot Elementary, Sharon Krista McAuliffe, Shays Elementary, Stephen William Hawking, Susan Dimmock, Valerie von Rosenvinge, Learning and Concepts, Discovery Elementary, Eco Discovery Elementary, Futures Elementary, Hiller Elementary, Hope 24 or sorry, the same thing just with a space, and Town Elementary. Those are the ones who have come in. And I think maybe we also got a Marion Harris. I don't want to leave her off the list.
No, you said.
You did say it.
Oh, okay, good. Put her in
Sorry.
orange. Oh, my gosh, what in my mind? Tree of Knowledge, Tree of Life, and then I want to talk about the town survey. So all of those, except for Marion Harris and Town Elementary, did go out in the survey. And so we had about 700 people respond to the survey, which is a really nice response. And so in the geographic category, as superintendent, it's my job to recommend to you some things tonight. So if we were going to make some recommendations from the geographic category, we had 3 that did in fact get an awful lot of votes in that category. So one that I think could be recommended is something along the lines of the Charles River or the head of the Charles View, Headwaters. Those all fall for me into that same category. And you can see the numbers of votes each one received. Charles River 161, head of the Charles 66, Charles View 104, and Headwaters 47. I think what's nice about Head of the Charles is that it fits in well with It All Starts Here, because that's also where the Charles River starts. This is, by word, the highest elevation that the Charles River is ever at, and so that syncs nicely with Hopkinton being the Hillers. And the Head of the Charles really does have proximity to the site of the new school. Whitehall is also one that would come with a recommendation. Geographically and historically, it's just very powerful here in town, and I think people think of it as a very beautiful space. My only reservation about Hayden Row is that all 5 schools will be on Hayden Row, so there could be potential confusion there. Marathon related, the start line got a lot of votes, it got 371.
Confused.
And I do think it's kind of a clever name. The one detraction for me is there is a proximity to the Start Line Brewery, which will be right next door to the school. We wouldn't want people confusing a brewery and an elementary school.
You're brewing students.
Yeah, we wouldn't want the students confusing a brewery and an elementary school. All right, so back to the school committee policy, because the school committee policy speaks very explicitly to the naming of a school after people, and that's where we're going next. And so what I've highlighted here in orange is that if we were to name the school after a person, a name with educational significance or inspiration should be chosen. So we just need to make sure that if you're choosing a person's name, there's got to be some kind of educational significance, or maybe something that is even inspiring. So that leaves, some of our names in the mix. And the first sort of bulleted item in that policy tells us that the person should have made a significant contribution to the educational community of Hopkinton as evidenced by contributions such as dedicated service to children and/or persistent efforts to generate and sustain an effective educational system for all students. So, when I looked at that category, and there were so many people in that category, I will say that if we combined all of those Hoyt votes, they did get the majority of the votes in the people category when we combined them all. Mary B. Nealon and Patriot were the 2 that received the next highest tiers of votes. It would be very hard for me as a person who is not a community member to say I would recommend to you this particular name of a person. And I am not discouraging you from choosing a person. It just feels to me that naming a school after a person is incredibly personal for a community. And I struggled to recommend a single person. As I read through the submissions, I did encounter many, many powerful and beautiful stories of Hopkinton people, Hopkinton's community, and really the unwavering commitment that Hopkinton has to its children. So we'll leave you with all of those names, but not give you a formal recommendation of an individual person.
The survey did cover names of people.
Yes, so when the survey went out, all of the ones that I read to you earlier, so Acorn, Judy Hoyt, any of those things, they were all there. They were in their categories. And the people were instructed that you could vote for no more than 2 in each one of the categories. So just logically, if you think about something like Start Line, if there were only 4 or 5 in that category, but in the people there were 10 or 15,
Right.
start line would get a lot more votes. So, and we had said earlier on that this wasn't going to be a voting thing, it was just going to help us to see where the town's mind was. Big concepts, the winner in that category, if we're thinking about winners, went to Hillers. And that one just felt a little awkward to me because Hillers really belongs sort of to the high school. And our 3 elementary schools have always had their own mascots. At Marathon, we have Cubby. At Elmwood, there are the Eagles. And at Hopkinton, there are the Hawks. So to take away the Eagles and put in the Hillers sort of with Cubby and Hawks didn't quite sit with me. I'm not sure why. And then I have sort of some out-of-the-box thinking. There was someone who had suggested to me, and this was someone who does not live in Hopkinton, it was just in a professional conversation, why not just name your new school in a way that is systemic and cohesive? Hopkinton, when I got here, and I remember having this conversation with lots of people, why were there not neighborhood schools? Why doesn't Hopkinton have sort of 3 to K-5s that feed into a middle school that feeds into a high school? And I understand that you really like your model, that all of your children are together in an early childhood learning center, that all of your kids then go to a 2-3 school, then they all go to a 4-5 school. So they have exposure to one another, if you're here from kindergarten, all the way to grade 12 for 13 years. Like the kids in those classes really get to know one another. And if you have all of your teachers at a particular grade level, you have an opportunity to deliver professional learning and ensure that there's a guaranteed and viable curriculum in that school. And those were some of the primary reasons why people said, this is a model that works for us. So the sort of out-of-the-box thinking, and I'll leave you with it, it's not my thinking, it's just that sort of thing that kind of made sense to me, given who you are. But if you called Marathon the Marathon Early Learning Center, and that covered pre-K and 1, and then students went to the Hopkinton Elementary School for grades 2, 3, and 4, and then kids went to the Hopkinton Lower Middle School for grades 5 and 6, and then they went to the Hopkinton Upper Middle School for grades 7 and 8, and then they went to Hopkinton High School for grades 9 to 12. There's just something that is reflective of their the grade level and the learning and the trajectory at that particular period in their lives. So, no.
Also avoids hurting people's feelings that they
It
theirs
also
didn't get
avoids
hurt.
hurting people's feelings. Yes, it does. Yeah. So,
Would you have
and that
to change
leaves
a
you
lot of-
choosing none of them.
If this were to happen, would you have to change much signage on the school?
Well, the only school building I think right now that has signage on the physical building is the Marathon School. So the signage on the school, but the signage outside would have to be, perhaps changed. If you were going to rename Marathon as an early learning center as opposed to elementary school. And one of the things that is going to have to happen when you open your new school is you're going to have to work with the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education to change the name of that building. I mean, to sort of bring it on. So changing one, you could change others. We should go to the what comes next, so that if people at home are thinking, oh my gosh, they're not going to vote right now, the answer is no, we're not going to vote right now. What comes next in the process is that the school committee will be making its decision on the 21st of March, 2024. So tonight you've been able to see sort of the town's thinking, as well as some of my own.
Any questions on the naming process that will come before us on the 21st?
And the 21st will get you past the 60
Yes.
days, 60 days in your policy.
How does the voting work? I mean, if each of us has a different name we think we should like, do we then have to caucus and try to convince, or, what happens? Because each of us could have a different thought of what the name should be.
So I think what we do is we have a conversation and see if things bubble up naturally. And correct me if I'm misstating what we've already discussed, but And then from there, we hope that somebody will feel moved to make a motion, and that a motion will in fact carry and then become the new school name.
Yes, and each time I send you here's another one, but please don't deliberate over it. This is the time that we can deliberate in open session.
What is the group that will be voting on? So the top two that you presented tonight in each category? Like, so process-wise, like,
I think we're able to take all of them. We do have Dr. Kavanaugh's recommendation, but we also will have the entire list if somebody feels like they want to make a stronger argument for, to advocate for a particular name that didn't bubble up as a recommendation. That's certainly
okay. So is
permissible.
we banking on a lot of time for this on the 21st?
It's going to be a really a riveting meeting between this, and then we'll also be discussing the education plan for Hopkins. So
Okay.
we will plan that out carefully.
We're gonna start seeing signs pop up around town with people advocating for one name or another.
All right. That then moves us into the school committee chair report. I want to start by saying payroll warrant S24017 has been approved. Warrants 24-047S, 24-048S, 24-049S, and 24-050S have been approved and included in your folder. The other piece I just wanted to touch on is that people at home, as well as people here, will have noticed that we are adding a meeting on Thursday, March 14th, which is next Thursday. It's a workshop. We did have a little bit of conversation about having an additional meeting for this. And the reason, multi-pronged reason for having it. One is that we are the body that is responsible for bringing this capital project potentially forward. And hopefully, we are able to get all of the questions that the community has, as well as questions that we have highlighted and brought out to be openly discussed. We want to make a transparent process. It's also an opportunity, we're going to start at 7 o'clock, and we're going to actually be at the Hopkins School. We're going to tour the school. There will be, HCAM is going to be recording parts of it so that people who are not physically there are able to see it's not going to video us walking around from point A to point B, but showing what is highlighted in each of the areas in the tour. And then we will go back to the Hopkins School Library where we'll have the workshop, and we will have an opportunity to really dive in deep. So in terms of about that, thinking that it would be helpful if we tried to generate questions as a committee and individually to bring forward. We had, Amanda and I were discussing just in terms of potentially 5 topics that if we could each maybe take one of them to gather questions for, and then there are some questions that maybe have already come under those, but then also whatever questions that people want to bring on their own. But so let me just go through the 5. One is why do we need to expand Hopkins, and to look at questions and things related to that, because we're also going to have an opportunity with our professional staff there. It's not just the 5 of us discussing, but we'll have Perkins Eastman there as well. So why do we need to expand Hopkins? When do we need to expand Hopkins would be the second category. The education plan, what will that be delivered? What will that look like? And again, that's a piece that we'll be voting on the following week, but part of our purview as well. And then is the design what is the design to accommodate the needs? So looking at the design of the school itself and how that meets the needs, questions related to that. And then where can we look to reduce costs? So just to shorten that, the why, the when, the education plan, the design, and the potential cost reductions that we could look at.
So I'm not understanding.
So because we can't deliberate between now And when we actually have this, there might be questions that people are aware of. If we could take something to kind of individually think about to make sure that there are things that you may have heard in the community to be able to represent at the meeting itself, in addition to whatever you may have on your own. So like, for example, one person could kind of gather questions and thoughts about why the expansion, and I mean, that's whatever questions you may have related to that. Not to say that everybody can't ask questions about it, but if we could look to make sure that these topics get covered, does that?
I'm sorry, I don't know if
That's
it's
okay.
late and I'm not following,
All right.
so we're, like, we've gotten questions
Yep.
as a committee, so we have those
yep.
questions.
Yes, so,
But like, the question you just mentioned, like, why the need for the expansion? That is a question, so what else falls under that?
so, I mean, I think, you know, there are a couple of different pieces, that, you know, looking at enrollment things. There are pieces that have been discussed, but if there are more pieces that we want to bring out about the, and it may be that you take your topic back and you think about it and have other things related to that or not. But I guess I was trying to make sure that we were able to have these pieces represented for the community.
I think that our goal, because we talked a little bit about this before the meeting, is for all the committee members to, like, each of us to take, you know, this topic and then have it be sort of a Q&A. So each of us would sort of moderate our topic, like make sure all the answers are getting out there. So like when we talk about when people have asked, I think the current plan is to open it with a 4-5 and then have Elmwood open and then it becomes a 5-6. People have asked about that. Why like that? What is driving that? Timing. You know, when do we really need this if we're moving out grade 4 and grade 5 is by itself? Is the middle school crowded and we need to offload grade 6, or could grade 5 stay by itself? Like questions like that around the timing that we haven't had a chance to dig into because it's hard to get into the depth of the topics when it's an update at an existing meeting. So things like, you know, we saw the design of the space to deliver the education, what kind of music space and STEM space. You know, are we comfortable with that design? Is it accommodating the education plan that we've voted on? Do we want to vote the education plan? We're gonna talk about that next meeting, but there's a bit of an expansion of related arts into 5th grade. You know, what is that gonna cost? How does that look? I mean, there's been a lot of questions around a lot of these things that we haven't quite gotten into, so dividing it up so that each of us can make sure we're getting all the depth in the topics and we're kind of pulling in all those questions, we thought would help.
So I hear exactly what you're saying, but where are we pulling those questions from? Like, are we going out and polling people ahead of next Thursday?
Or you can you can generate them yourself, just getting deep in the materials on your topic, you know.
Okay.
Or questions that you have seen that have been brought to us that you might want to highlight on a particular topic.
Got it, okay.
We don't have to come up with all the questions ourselves, but you also don't have to, I don't think anyone, when we were discussing that, was envisioning that we would go out and
Right.
poll people, but rather kind of what you've heard in the community, what you've heard from people.
There are people who aren't even aware that this is coming up.
So, you know, and that's a piece of where our work lies right now, is trying to elevate the conversation so that people are hearing about it in different arenas.
So much about the new Elmwood, and then this is kind of like a shark under the water, so to speak. That's
I hope it's not a
probably
shark.
not a shark, not a good analogy. I was just thinking how silently they creep up.
Hopefully it's more like a dolphin. But, you know, I think there are questions in the community that people are asking, and that it's important that we be able to look and hear what people are saying and to consider different pieces.
So this isn't really even showing up in calendars yet.
in terms of which calendars on the website?
Well, like our school committee calendar,
I did send, did you get the calendar invite I sent out?
I think so, but it's just not, like, we all, like, all of our committee meetings.
Well, it's not
Be-
posted
It
yet.
was, yep, it's
'cause-
not posted yet
Okay.
because it was an add-in.
I think I only got your text about it. It's not that I don't have it on my calendar, I'm just worried about for other people, like what you just said, like how are people knowing?
Yep, so, you know, certainly want to put a blast out and try to generate interest in people watching, and being able to rewatch and get the information and questions moved from our discussion, hopefully into the frequently asked questions on the website.
And there are 2 public forums coming up.
Yes.
So,
Yep.
and we had one public forum. We were actually, Nancy and I were at the table for the public forum. So this is a chance for a school committee as representatives of the community to get deep in the content in a way that we haven't been able to before. And the community can then watch that. It's a public meeting, they can sit there if they want, or they can watch the recording of it. But then the community can ask their own questions at the public forums that are coming up with this additional
Right.
detail.
Probably would be good if, I don't know the timing of the paper, but if it were publicized, that people knew about it and would, that they could get a video sense of what, you know, what we're talking about.
Well, I think also we would then potentially get more questions to
Yep.
be able to pull together.
So certainly, I think we want to make sure that this is publicized and that people understand that
Because
we're
I'm
looking
sure
for
we're not the
questions.
big ratings getter on
Oh, you know, sometimes we have
HCAM.
been, sometimes we have been. But so in addition, there are 2 forums in April. One's gonna be on the 2nd and the other's gonna be towards the end, at the end of the month ahead of town meeting. So that will give people, this is hopefully infusing a little bit more interest from the community if we're able to publicize it, get the information out there, and ask questions, some of which are hard questions, some of which, you know, I know have been asked a number of times, but the opportunity to ask them in different ways and share the information differently certainly gives people more information. It is just recognizing in terms of the hour that we're at, and the fact that this is a new piece, this is really a scheduling piece in terms of grabbing on to a topic. So I do feel like I can send that out so people, and because Adam's also not here, to be able to figure out which of those topics people feel like they would like to, and if that feels like, I want to make sure that everybody feels like that is if you have a better kind of structure, I certainly am.
I mean, I'm
Yeah.
fine with you just assigning numbers to the questions, like, I don't think it really,
Okay.
I don't have a personal proclivity towards one topic or another.
All right, so if anybody has a preference over why, when, education plan, design, and cost reduction,
I
shoot
would
me an email.
take the easy one, why?
Okay, so I have Susan at Y. And then I can send out, people can, if they, otherwise I'll assign numbers to it. All right, that, I don't have any more in terms of the school committee chair report. Do people have liaison reports?
I don't.
I went to the Sustainable Green Committee meeting this week. Of note for us is just that they'll be bringing forward to annual town meeting the specialized code, which they had brought forth last, at the special town meeting, and it was voted down. It's a building code that, I'm not gonna do it justice, especially not this hour, but it expands the requirement for new construction to be ready to be electrification, to have electrification, and not rely necessarily, it can rely, but it has to be wired to be fully electric. And it would be just for a code that would govern new construction. And I think that it might then be something that the school, new construction, if it's passed, in the future, school construction would have to we follow that as well, which is why I mention it. And that's it. They are going to be putting out more literature about what the specialized code is. There's nothing for us to do. I'm just sharing that it's coming back to town meeting again. And I think when we were at the ESBC2 last meeting that we went to, I think they're already in a place where they'd be prepared for the specialized code, even though the town hasn't adopted it. So I think that's it. A lot of other work going on with that committee, but that's the one that intersects our world.
All right, then any future agenda items people want to throw out for, as we're considering future agendas? Okay, then that brings us into items by consensus.
Okay, as superintendent, I recommend the school committee approve the items by consensus as outlined in your agenda.
So moved.
Motion by Lori, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Amanda, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so that then moves us into adjournment. Does somebody like to make a motion?
I move to adjourn the meeting.
Motion by Susan, is there a second?
Second?
Second by Amanda, all those in favor?
Aye.
And we are adjourned at 9:44. Thank you all, and thank you for hanging in a longer than anticipated meeting. Have a good night. And our next meetings, next Thursday, the 14th, on the Hopkins project, and then a regular meeting on the 21st, as well as an executive session then, and then on April 4th. Good night.